Hey guys, it's Savannah from Hey Wanderer, and today I'm going to show you how I built this bench for our stock tank pool. I will list below all the things you need, but it's pretty simple, straightforward: wood, screws, some tools. This has been a game changer for us. Last year we just had this edge right here to sit on. Yeah, hurt your booty, but this is great. We can fit very comfortably 8 people sitting on the outside, plenty of people sitting on the inside. It's perfect. So let's get started. The first thing I did was take some string and mark out 8 even sections. To be honest, my sections weren't really all that even. When I measured across our pool, I got a couple different measurements, meaning our stock tank pool isn't a perfect circle. So definitely keep that in mind. I started this project with a perfect sketch and strategy and soon realized I was going to have to play it by ear. Anyway, I just taped the 2 ends of a piece of string right in the middle of the pool and repeated that 4 times until it seemed like the sections were all even. This is where the stands for the benches will go. The next thing I did was measure a piece of wood for each section. I took a 1x6 piece of wood and laid it on the edge of the pool where the bench would start closest to the pool. I measured the length between the 2 strings and then took a ruler to trace the angle where the string met the wood. Then I repeated that on each side and ended up with 8 pieces, 1 for each section. Then I cut each angle with a miter saw. When laid out, these pieces all create an octagon. Next, I laid 3 pieces of wood side by side and spaced them out about 1/4 of an inch. I made a spacer by taping together a bunch of business cards. I used a ruler to trace the same angle on each piece of wood. Make sure you are tracing where the angles both go outward and not inward. Each piece should be bigger than the next. Then I cut where I had traced. I ended up only doing a couple sections and then cut the rest of them as I was assembling the bench. This seemed to work best for me so I could be more exact. It's also a good idea to mark the tops of these pieces as you want the angles to match up correctly. Next, I assembled the stands. You'll have to decide how tall you want your bench to be. Ours is 26 inches tall, and that seems to be the perfect height for sitting and dipping your legs in the pool. So you'll need to cut 2 pieces of 2x4 to the length of your bench height, minus 2.5. So our pieces were 23.5 inches. Then I cut a piece of 2x4 to 16.5 inches because that is the width we wanted. That was the easiest because 16.5 inches is 3 1x6 pieces laid side by side. Then I also cut a piece of 2x4 to be 13.5 inches. I screwed in 2 screws halfway on each end of the 16.5 inch piece. And then I put the 23.5 inch pieces against that piece and finished screwing the screws in. Then I placed the shorter piece, the 13.5 inch piece, in between the 23.5 pieces and screwed it in to the 16.5 piece. Next, I attached the bench seat to the stands. I took 3 pieces of one section and placed the edges along the center of the top of a stand on each end. Then I screwed the pieces down and turned the bench over. Then I added the brace pieces. I cut 3 pieces for the bracing, 1 for the larger outside section between the 2 stands, 1 for the smaller inside section between the 2 stands, and then 1 between those 2 pieces. The ends of these have to be measured to the angle of the stands to fit in perfectly. I just laid a 2x4 on top parallel to the bench top pieces and then traced the angle underneath with a pencil. Also, make sure that the smaller brace piece that will be nearest to the pool isn't right on the edge. If it is, it will bump against the pool and won't allow for the stands to go right up against it. Once I screwed the braces in, this section was complete and ready to be put in place. Our pump outlet is pretty high and came into contact with one of the braces, so I had to cut out the wood where the pump was. You definitely don't want a bench putting pressure on your pump connections. You'll want to line up the center of the stands with the string you placed on the pool earlier. If your measurements are correct, the bench section should reach from one string to the other. But if it doesn't, don't get too worried about it. You can adjust the next section you work on to be a little longer or shorter depending on what you need. The strings are more of a guideline to get you started. Next, I made another bench section that was 2 sections away from the one I just put in place. I lined it up with the strings in its section. I made sure my bench seat pieces that belong in the section between these 2 sections would fit in that space between, and it turned out they were a little too big. I placed them on top of the other sections and traced the angle from underneath and then cut the wood. Next, I proceeded to add the brace pieces before screwing on the tops. When you're attaching 2 sections together, you're doing some of these steps in reverse. Then I put the top pieces in place and screwed them in. Repeat these steps in whatever order you prefer until you've completed all sections. So that's how I made the bench. If you have any questions, just ask them below. I'll do my best to respond. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. We will be doing lots of these projects throughout the summer and probably in the winter too. If you haven't set up a stock tank pool, we have a whole tutorial on how to do it, and I will link the video here. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you at our next project.